Yeah, and I found it to be a threat to democracy because what actually happened was, whatever you think about Trump and Hillary in the 2016 election and whoever you wanted to win, there's no question that Trump won fair and square.
Right.
He got more electoral college votes and under the Constitution became the legitimate president. And the reality is that many power centers in the United States simply never accepted that outcome because it wasn't the one they wanted, and they felt threatened by it. And so they devoted themselves to doing everything they could, first to preventing him from winning and then subverting his presidency once he won, in ways that are really quite menacing to democracy. The whole russiagate script came from the CIA, which is not supposed to have any involvement in our domestic politics.
Right.
And yet, because he was questioning things like the ongoing value of NATO, which was originally created to be a bulwark against a country that no longer exists, or the regime change operation in Syria, which was their highest priority, running against the Iraq War, talking about, the Pentagon getting weapon systems that we don't need in order to enrich lobbyists and Raytheon board of directors, all these things that were very threatening to real entrenched power centers in Washington, using this partnership that they've always had throughout the Cold War with the major media outlets. They just set out to destroy his presidency in a way that I found infinitely more menacing than whatever one might think about Donald Trump and the things that he was doing.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the way they used the FISA courts, and I mean, if you can set out and do this to the president of the United States, the regular Joe doesn't have a chance. Not a chance.
Glenn, I think when I was on your show, the first time you and I spoke, when we met, I was in Texas. I think we spent most of the time talking about the Snowden reporting I did about the NSA. And obviously, that has been a cause of mine for a long time, is the danger posed by this enormous spying system. And when Edward Snowden decided to come forward after spending his life inside of these agencies because he originally believed in them, he volunteered for the Iraq War, he worked for the CIA, he worked for the NSA. His father was in the Coast Guard. He was not a left-wing radical by any means. He donated money to Ron Paul. When he came forward, it was because he said, they're now turning this on the American people. They're now, this is no longer a weapon system being used against foreign adversaries. And, I do think that the scandal of the FBI getting caught lying to the FISA court in order to spy on a U.S. citizen, Carter Page, who even Robert Mueller concluded there was no evidence to suggest he was ever a Russian agent, let alone engaging in nefarious conduct on behalf of the Kremlin. It was a major, major scandal. I mean, an FBI lawyer went to jail for lying or was convicted of perjury. Those kind of abuses of power, if you inverted them, I mean, that was the kind of stuff that J. Edgar Hoover did, that Joseph McCarthy did, that people in the Nixon administration did, that caused a major scandal. We need to reform the intelligence here. I don't even think nobody even remembers that.
I mean, if people don't pay for their crimes, it teaches the next group of people that want to do crime, we can get away with it as long as we're on the right side of, the press or whoever.
Yeah, it's so funny. I wrote an article in January of 2017, either days before or days after Trump's inauguration, the headline of which was "The Deep State Goes to War with the Elected President." And I think it was Rush Limbaugh who spoke about that story that week and started claiming that I was the person who had invented this phrase. And then liberals also thought this was like this newly invented conspiracy theory by the right wing, by Trump supporters, when in reality, the idea of a deep state and, in the United States is something that thrived among political scientists. Yeah, I mean, Eisenhower, he didn't call it that. He called it the military-industrial complex, but it was the same message. His message, he was, president for 8 years when the CIA was created and grew. And he had he had 15 minutes to warn the country on his way out about whatever he thought they should know. And he said, here's what I want to warn you about. There's this permanent faction that's entrenching itself, that's more powerful than elected officials, that is this military industrial complex that's infecting every hall of academia and every hall of power, and its influence is going to threaten democracy. This is before the Vietnam War, before 9/11, before the gigantic growth from both of those and throughout the decades, it's, if you don't recognize the existence of the deep state, and if you're not concerned about it, you know nothing about American politics and how power in the U.S. government functions.
I have to tell you, I thought the phrase, I was really uncomfortable at the beginning of deep state. It implies like a star chamber and everything else, where all you have to do is really go back and read Eisenhower. He talked about it's going to infest in the colleges and the universities. It's going to start funding projects where it's not really an honest question. It's a question to further their agenda. It will infiltrate everything and destroy everything. That's what it is. That's what it is.